7 minutes apart, the contractions were getting stronger. But Claire's husband was not driving her to the hospital. He was driving her into a blizzard to leave her there. When the car died on a deserted mountain road and he walked away, taking the keys and abandoning his pregnant wife to the cold, Claire realized the truth. This was not panic, not bad luck, but a carefully planned betrayal. And then the night was only beginning.
With contractions Simmersport faced a terrible truth. Her husband was not taking her to the hospital. He was driving her somewhere to abandon her. The car failed on a lonely mountain road in a blizzard. No cell service. Derek told her he was walking for help. He took off his wedding ring, left it on the dashboard, and disappeared into the snow. That is when it all clicked for Claire. This was not an accident. This was intentional. 9 months pregnant, in labor, and trapped in the cold, she was utterly alone. But Derek made one critical mistake. He never could have predicted what would unfold. You see, Claire Bennett had a strength no one had ever seen. And the person who eventually found her was not some random truck driver. He held a secret that would alter her life forever. This is the incredible story of a woman giving birth in a car during a blizzard. She survived against all odds and learned that deep betrayal can lead to an amazing new beginning. This is Claire's story, and it starts with headlights vanishing in the snow. Pull over now. Claire clutched on the dashboard as another contraction seized her. But Derek kept on driving. The icy windshield wipers scraped back and forth. The rhythmic sound echoed like a nervous heart. "Derek," I said, "pull over." "We are nearly there," he replied. His knuckles were white on the wheel. "Just breathe." Claire tried to catch her breath. The hospital was 40 minutes away. The clinic was just 10 minutes behind them. She had begged him to turn around 3 times. He had refused every time. The snow was coming down faster now. Large, wet snowflakes clung to every surface. The road was lost under a blanket of white. Mountains loomed on either side, dark silhouettes against a gray sky. "This is not right," Claire's voice trembled. "The clinic has all the things we need. The hospital is better. Beth's sister had her baby at the clinic last month. It has doctors and equipment. I want you at the hospital." Derek's jaw was clenched. He had that stubborn look that signaled the conversation was over. Claire knew that look. She had seen it for 6 years and more frequently these past 9 months. The pain subsided. Claire checked her phone, but there was no signal. The mountains blocked the reception. She checked again, but still nothing. She locked and unlocked the screen, checking one last time. The signal bars remained empty. "How much further?" she asked. 30 minutes, maybe 35. The car started to slow down. Derek tapped the brakes. The engine sputtered, as if it were choking. Then it went silent. They drifted to a stop on the side of the road as snow gathered around them. The wipers froze mid-swipe. The heater died. All she could hear was the wind pushing against the car. "What happened?" Claire asked. Derek turned the key. There was silence. He tried again. The engine only clicked. He slammed his palm on the steering wheel. "Derek, I do not know." He kept his eyes looking forward. "It just died," he said. Claire's heart was racing. They were isolated. No cars had passed in 20 minutes. The snow was worsening, and her contractions were 7 minutes apart. "Please try again," she said. He turned the key. Click, click. "It is dead. We have to call someone." Claire held up her phone, but there is no signal. Derek took out his phone. He stared at his phone. He then opened the glove compartment and put his phone inside. He shut the door. "What are you doing?" Claire asked. "I am saving the battery." His voice was flat. "In case we need it later." "We need it now. Try making a call." "There is no signal." "You just said that." "Then we will flag down a car in this storm." Derek stared into the blizzard. "Nobody will be coming through here tonight." Another contraction started to build inside Claire. She pressed her hands to her belly, breathing hard. The pain was sharper now, the timing closer. Ruby was coming. Ruby was coming very soon. "So what do we do?" Claire asked when she was able to talk. Derek unbuckled his seatbelt. He zipped his jacket and pulled up his hood. "I will walk," he said. "There is a gas station at about. I will get help." 2 miles in this storm, Derek? That is nuts. It is not nuts. It is the only thing to do. He opened the door, letting in a rush of cold air and snow. He grabbed the keys from the ignition and put them in his pocket. "Wait, give me the keys. What if the car starts?" "If it starts, I will need them at the station to tell them what car it is." He stepped outside. "Lock the doors and stay warm. I will be back with help." "Derek, wait," she called. But he was already walking off, his dark jacket vanishing in the snow. Claire watched him disappear as her breath fogged the window. She cleared the condensation with her sleeve. The small light from his phone moved in the distance, then turned a corner and was gone. Claire was left in total silence. The inside of the car was growing colder by the minute. She could see her own breath. She reached for Derek's jacket in the back, the one he did not take. It smelled of his cologne, the pricey kind his mother always gave him. She wrapped it tightly around herself. Then her eyes fell on the dashboard where his hand had rested, his wedding ring. The gold band shone in the faint light. Claire picked it up. It was still warm from his skin. She turned it over in her hand, reading the words inside, "Forever yours," their wedding date. He had taken his ring off. He did it before he left, when she was not looking. Clara's throat felt tight. She checked her phone one more time, no signal. She tried to call out anyway. The call did not go through. She dialed Derek's number, but that failed as well. She opened her texts. His last message was 3 days old. Working late, laid off and every night for the past 2 weeks. Sometimes he would not come home until after she was asleep. Some nights he slept in the spare room, saying he did not want to wake her. Her contractions were now 6 minutes apart. Claire looked down the empty road. She saw no lights, no cars, only snow, darkness, and the wind against the car. She locked the doors, just like he said, but then she unlocked them. What if help arrived and could not get inside? She locked them one more time, then unlocked them again. Her hands trembled. This could not be real. At any moment, Derek would return. He must have forgotten something, like his charger or his wallet. He would knock on the glass, and she would let him in, and he would apologize. He would say he was stressed out and that everything would be okay. But the road in front of her stayed empty. Claire dropped the wedding ring into the cup holder. She could not hold it anymore. Looking at it made her stomach churn. She tried to think. The hospital was too far to walk, not while 9 months pregnant and having a baby. The clinic was behind her, but also too far away, and Derek's had taken the keys, so she had to wait. Someone would eventually come. This was a state road after all. People drove on it, just not right now in this storm. But they would when the snow eased up. She reached for the heat, then remembered the car was dead. No warmth, no radio, nothing. Her water had not broken yet, which was a good thing. It meant she had some time. First babies take a long while. Her friend Beth, who was a nurse, told her that. First babies can take 12, even 20 hours. Claire had time. Another contraction came, this one lasting longer. Claire counted to 45. She had been counting them since leaving the house. They were getting longer and stronger. Snow piled onto the windshield, thick and soft. It blocked her view of everything. Claire was inside a cold, dark snow globe. She thought about his phone in the glove box. Derek said he put it there to save the battery, but that explanation did not feel right. With no signal, the phone would not drain its battery. Claire leaned forward, her belly against the steering wheel. She opened the glove box. Derek's phone was there, face down, beside the manual and insurance papers. And right beside it was another phone, a second phone she had never seen before. Claire picked it up. It was a cheap, disposable phone, the kind you buy at gas stations. The screen was cracked. There was no password. She opened it to find text messages from someone called V. There were hundreds of them from the last few months. "Cannot wait to see you. V. Same hotel. V. Your wife still has no clue." Claire's vision went blurry. She scrolled up and saw his older messages. "I need more time. The baby was not planned. I will leave after it is born." The phone slipped from Claire's fingers and fell to the floor. She pressed her fist against her eyes. This was not a bad dream. It was really happening. Derek was not walking to get help. He was walking away for good. He had planned everything. The far hospital instead of the close clinic. The car breaking down out here. Taking the keys and his wedding ring. It was all planned. Another contraction struck. Claire doubled over. The pain was deeper now, more urgent. Ruby was coming. Ruby was on her way, and Claire was completely alone. She tried the door. Maybe she could walk back. But when she pushed the door open, the wind forced it shut. Snow stung her face, and the cold took her breath away. She pulled the door closed again. She could not walk in these conditions, especially not in labor. Claire locked the door, for good this time. She clutched Derek's jacket tighter. The smell of that cologne made her want to be sick. The wedding ring sat in the cup holder, taunting her. Claire grabbed it. She rolled the window down just a crack. Then she threw the ring out as hard as she could. It vanished into the white snow. Good. Let it stay out there. Let it freeze and be buried and lost for all time. Claire pulled the car window closed, brushing a layer of snow from her arm. She could barely feel her fingers. They were so numb. Another pain gripped her stomach, coming just 5 minutes after the last one. Outside, the wind howled, and in the suffocating darkness, Claire Bennett was completely on her own. It all started when she stared at 2 pink lines in the bathroom. She had actually taken 3 tests, and every single one was positive. All showed 2 clear pink lines, leaving no doubt. She was having a baby. Her hands trembled as she arranged the tests in a row on the bathroom counter. 3 little sticks confirmed her entire life was about to change. She called out for Derek to please come see. Footsteps hurried down the hall before the door swung open. Derek stood there in his work suit, ready for another day of selling houses he could not afford himself. He asked what was going on. Claire handed him one of the tests, managing a smile despite her shaky hands. She told him, "We're pregnant." Derek looked down at the test. He studied the lines, and then his face just went blank, completely empty of any emotion. A moment later, a smile appeared, but it felt forced and late. "That is great," he said, his voice unnaturally high. He repeated how great it was. When he asked if she was okay, she said yes, that she was fine, that this was wonderful. He carefully put the test down, saying he just needed a moment to let it sink in. They had talked about having children for years, after all. He agreed, saying he wanted them. He really did. He was just surprised. He said he surprised in a good way. Derek placed his hands on her shoulders and looked right into her eyes. That fake, bright smile was still on his face. He called it a wonderful surprise and said he was going to be a dad. He kissed her on the forehead. Then he glanced at his watch. He said he had to show a house at 9 o'clock, but they would celebrate that night. He promised to take her to the Italian restaurant she loved. And then he was gone. Claire heard the front door shut, the car engine's front start, and the sound of him driving away. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. She knew she should feel overjoyed, and part of her did. But she could not shake the image of that empty look in Derek's eyes, how it lingered for too long. She tried to convince herself it was just shock. She thought he would be excited once the news really settled in. But as time went on, he never got excited. The weeks turned into months, and as Claire's belly started to grow, Derek only grew more distant. He started working late every single night, sometimes not getting home until 9 or 10. He would come home, quietly eat the dinner she had saved for him, and go straight to bed, often without even kissing her goodnight. She would ask how his day was, and he would just say it was fine. She would ask if the big Morrison deal had closed, and he would say not yet. When she tried to talk about baby names, he would claim he was too tired. He always promised they could talk about it tomorrow, but that tomorrow never seemed to arrive. She told herself it was just stress from his job. The housing market was slow, and money was a constant worry. She thought he was just concerned about providing for his new family. She had to believe that was all it was. And then she started noticing the phone. Derek had his phone with him all the time now. He even took it into the shower and kept it by the bed while he slept. Whenever it buzzed, he would quickly check it and then walk out of the room. He would return 5 minutes later, claiming it was just work. It seemed like work was texting him an awful lot, even at midnight. Claire brought it up to him one time, and only one time. She said he was constantly on his phone. Derek looked up from his screen. He told her he had clients, and they did not care what time it was. When she asked about the texts at midnight, he insisted that some people work odd hours. His voice was sharp and defensive, and that was the end of the conversation. Claire tried to tell herself she was just being paranoid. She knew pregnancy hormones could make women emotional, making them imagine problems that were not really there. She thought she was just overthinking things, but she was not. One afternoon, her best friend Beth came to visit. They had been friends since college. Beth had curly red hair and a very honest personality. As they sat in the living room drinking tea, Beth looked at her carefully. She finally asked how things were going with Derek. Claire insisted everything was fine. Beth knew better. she said. You are my best friend. I know when you are not telling the truth. Claire put her tea down and instinctively touched her belly. She was 4 months pregnant now and just beginning to show. She admitted that he had been distant ever since she told him about the baby. Beth asked what she meant. Claire explained he worked late all the time, barely spoke to her, and even seemed to pull away when she tried to touch him. Beth was silent for a while. Then Beth told her she had been holding her tongue for years about this. Claire was confused. Beth explained that she had never truly liked Derek. She admitted he was charming and handsome, but she always felt like something was missing inside him. She never said anything. She knew Claire loved him, and she had hoped she was wrong. But now, she said if he was acting this way during the pregnancy, it was a huge warning sign. Claire suggested maybe he was just scared about being a first-time father. Beth did not sound convinced, but she made Claire promise her something. She told her to call if things got any worse or if she ever needed help. Claire promised she would, but she never did call because admitting how bad things were would make it all too real, and she was not ready for that. The months passed slowly as Claire's belly got much bigger. Derek became even more of a stranger. He made an excuse to miss the ultrasound appointment. He skipped the childbirth class. He completely forgot her birthday. He always had a reason. It was always about work, and it was always something more important than her. Claire eventually stopped asking him to be a part of it all. It was less painful that way. She got everything ready for the baby by herself, decorating the nursery and reading parenting books all alone. And then Derek's mother, Vivian, came for a visit when Claire was 7 months pregnant. She was a tall, thin woman who always wore pearls. She scanned their small apartment with a look of clear disapproval. Instead of saying hello, the first thing Vivian said was that Claire was showing a lot. Claire replied that was usually what happens during pregnancy. Vivian warned her not to eat for 2, calling it a myth and saying she would never lose the baby weight. Claire had to bite her tongue to keep from saying something back. Derek just stood in the kitchen and did not say a word to defend her. Vivian then sat on the couch and said Derek told her things had been difficult lately. Claire insisted things were fine. Vivian said that was not what she had heard. She claimed she heard that Claire was being very emotional and demanding. Claire was shocked. Vivian continued, saying that pregnancy hormones make women act irrationally and that Claire needed to be more considerate of her son. Claire looked over at Derek for help, but he was just staring at his phone, pretending not to hear any of it. Claire finally told Vivian that she should probably leave. Vivian claimed she was only trying to help. Claire said she was not helping, she was just insulting her inside her own home. Vivian stood up, smoothed her skirt, and gave a cold smile. She said the hormones were even worse than Derek had described, and that she would return when Claire was acting more reasonably. Then she left, and Derek walked her out. Claire could hear them whispering in the hallway before Derek came back in alone. She is just trying to help, Derek said. No, she is not. She is worried about what people think. She called me fat and irrational. Oh, I know she's from an older generation, and they speak differently. Claire felt hot tears welling in her eyes. Tears of anger, not sorrow. Are you actually taking her side? Derek let out a weary sigh, as if she was draining all his energy. I am too exhausted for this, Claire. Can we please let it go? He walked into the bedroom and shut the door. Claire was left standing herself in the living room. She placed her hands on her stomach, feeling Ruby kick. It is all right, she whispered to her baby. We do not need him. We have one another. But she knew she did need him. She was scared. A new mother with no clue, and her partner had mentally disappeared long ago. The days turned into weeks, and soon Claire's due date was very close. Derek was like a ghost in their apartment, physically there but emotionally gone. Then, 3 days before her due date, Claire saw something. She had gotten up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom for the millionth time. As she walked back to bed, she noticed the guest room door was slightly open. The light was on inside, so Claire pushed the door open a little more. She saw Derek standing with his back to her. He was busy packing a suitcase, neatly folding his shirts and rolling up his socks. What are you doing? She asked him. Derek jumped in surprise and spun around, his face suddenly pale. He claimed he was doing nothing, just organizing some clothes. But she knew that was not organizing, it was packing. He told her he might have a work trip in a few weeks after the baby arrived. She asked him what work trip. He said it was a conference in Denver and claimed he had told her about it before, but Claire knew he had never mentioned it. She was just too tired and uncomfortable to start a fight about another one of his lies. So she just said okay and asked him to let her know when he was leaving. She went back to bed and laid there staring at the ceiling. But Derek never came back to the room. He stayed in that sked room for the rest of the night. The next morning, the suitcase was gone, hidden away somewhere. Claire did not even try to look for it, because she did not want to know the truth. But now, sitting in her broken-down car on the side of the road, Claire finally understood everything. That suitcase was never for a work trip. It was for his escape, for abandoning her when she needed him the most. Derek had been planning to leave her for months, maybe even longer. Maybe he started planning it the very day she showed him that positive pregnancy test. Another powerful contraction ripped through her body. Claire gasped for air and timed it. It lasted for 1 full minute. The contraction only 4 minutes apart now. She remembered the second phone in the glove compartment and the secret messages from a woman named Viv. She thought of all the nights Derek supposedly worked late. She thought of all the times he chose his phone instead of her. She remembered the coldness, the distance, and all the lies. Every single warning sign had been there all along. She had just chosen not to see them. I was so stupid, she said out loud to herself. Her voice sounded small and scared in the quiet car. She put her hand on the window, feeling the freezing cold glass against her skin. Outside, the snow continued to fall heavily, and the wind would not stop howling. Derek's footprints in the snow were already gone, completely covered over. It was as if he had never even been there at all. The cold started to creep in slowly, and then it hit her all at once. At first, Claire barely felt it. She was trying to focus on her breathing and timing the contractions, telling herself that someone would come to help. After 30 minutes, her fingers started to feel numb. By 45 minutes, her toes had no feeling. An hour later, her breath turned to white mist. The car was like an icebox. Claire hugged Derek's jacket around her. She shoved her hands under her arms. She pulled her legs up, but the cold was just too much. The chill seeped through every crack and seal of the car. She gave the ignition another try, just hoping. Maybe the car would suddenly work. Maybe whatever Derek did would reverse itself. Just a clicking sound. Nothing. The battery was gone, or the engine failed, or Derek had disconnected something to make sure the car would not start. Claire stared at the glove compartment. She's looked at the second phone still lying inside, the one filled with text from a person named V. She picked it up and read more messages. Her stomach churned with every word she read. Book the hotel for Thursday. I cannot wait to escape with you. How much longer until you finally leave her? Derek's reply was there, soon after the baby. He promised her he just needed the perfect time. The perfect time was apparently now in a blizzard on a deserted road while Claire was alone and having a baby. She tossed the phone back into the compartment and slammed the door shut. Her hands trembled too much to hold anything steady.
How long had this been happening? It must have been for months, maybe even longer than her whole pregnancy.
Claire remembered their last anniversary, 6 years of marriage. They went out for dinner. Derek was on his phone the entire time. She had gotten upset. He said it was for work. It was always for work. Was he texting V that night? Was V the reason he avoided going out with her? Another contraction seized her body. Claire held the steering wheel tight and breathed through her teeth. It lasted for 70 long seconds. After it ended, she checked her phone again. There was still no signal, no service bars. She was completely stranded. She had to think of a plan. Just sitting there was not helping. The car was only getting colder. The contractions were becoming more intense. Ruby was on her way, ready or not. Her first option was to walk back to the clinic, but that was 10 miles away, in a snowstorm while she was in labor. She would not make it. The second option was the gas station Derek mentioned, 2 miles away. That was still too far and too risky. The third option was to wait for another car, but none had passed for over an hour. The road was likely already closed. Her fourth choice was to remain in the car and wait. She hoped for help to arrive. She hoped the storm would pass. She hoped her water would not break and that Ruby would not be born too quickly. It was her only choice. Stay put, wait, and hope. Claire chafed her hands and blew warm air on them. The small amount of heat from her breath was gone in 5 seconds, and then the freezing cold returned. She remembered her birthing class, the one Derek missed. She had attended by herself, watching other couples hold hands and practice their breathing. The teacher was so cheerful, almost too much so. She had called labor a beautiful, natural event. Your body knows what to do, she had said, but a body does not know what to do when it is freezing cold, all alone, and filled with fear. Claire looked at her phone one more time. Still no service, but she opened her photo gallery. She scrolled through old pictures of her and Derek. There was one from their wedding day, his arm wrapped around her, both of them smiling. She wondered when everything went so wrong. When did he stop loving her? Or did he ever really love her at all? Maybe V was right. Perhaps Derek was just waiting for the right moment to leave her. Maybe Claire was just a placeholder, someone to have around until a better option appeared. Her phone's battery was now at 30%. Claire closed the pictures. She had to save the battery just in case she actually survived and needed to call someone, or in case Derek came back and she had to call the police on him. She let out a short, bitter laugh in the silent car. Derek was not coming back. She knew that for certain. Another contraction came, stronger than this last. She bent over, fighting the seatbelt. She counted. 85 seconds. It had been 3 minutes since the last one. Her water had not broken yet. That was a good sign. It was a very good sign. Once that happened, things would speed up very quickly. Claire gazed out the window. The snow was now halfway up the car door. The entire world was a blur of white. There were no clear shapes, just an endless field of snow. She thought of her mother, who had passed away 2 years ago from cancer. It was fast and unforgiving. She was gone just 3 months after her diagnosis. Claire had held her hand at the very end, telling her it was okay to go. What would her mom think if she saw her now, abandoned like this? Her mom would be so angry. She never really trusted Derek. She was always polite, but Claire saw the worried look on her face at the wedding, that fake smile. "Are you sure about him?" Her mom had asked the night before. "I love him," Claire had told her. "Love is not always enough, dear. You need respect and a true partner. I am not sure Derek can give you that." "Mom, please do not do this." Okay. I just want you to be happy." Claire had not remembered that conversation for years. She had ignored it and pushed it away. Admitting her mom was right meant admitting she had made a terrible mistake. A 6-year-long mistake. The cold was getting much worse now. Claire's teeth began to chatter. She clenched her jaw to make it stop, but that only made her face ache. Her whole body was in pain. The pregnancy was painful. The labor was painful. But being abandoned hurt the most. She looked around at the clutter in the car. There were maps in the door and tissues on the console. Derek's jacket was on her shoulders. An ice scraper was on the floor. Claire started to tidy up. She could not control anything else, so she controlled this. She folded the maps neatly and stacked the tissues. She placed everything in perfect order. Her hands were shaking, but she continued. Being organized gave her a sense of control, and control meant she was safe. But nothing was safe right now. Still, doing something felt better than doing nothing. Another contraction started. 90 seconds. 2 minutes since the last one. This was it. This was actually happening. Ruby was going to be born here in this car, in the cold, with no help at all. Claire felt a wave of panic wash over her. It made it hard to breathe and made her vision blurry. She tried to breathe in through her nose and out through her mouth, just like in the childbirth class. But breathing did not stop the pain, the cold, or the fear. She took out her phone again. No signal, of course, but she opened her contacts anyway. She scrolled to Derek's name. Her thumb paused over the call button. What would she even say to him? "You left me here. You left me here to die. You planned all of this. You are a complete coward." But she knew calling was pointless. He would not answer, and even if he did, it would not change anything. Claire deleted Derek's contact from her phone. She just tapped the little trash can symbol. Then she confirmed to delete him. He was gone. It felt like a small victory on a night full of defeat. She then went through her phone and deleted everything related to him. His pictures, his texts, all of it. The battery was at 20%. Claire put her phone down and pulled the jacket tighter. The smell of his cologne was fading. It was being replaced by the smell of the car. Stale air and fear. Then she heard a noise from outside. Claire quickly looked up. Was that a car engine? She leaned against the window and tried to see through the snow. There was nothing. It was just the wind. It was just her imagination. No one was coming for her. Another contraction started. This one made Claire scream. The pain was much sharper this time. She gripped the steering wheel so tightly that her knuckles turned white. When the pain subsided, she looked at the car's clock. It had stopped at 7:42. The exact moment the car died. The moment Derek had left her. How long had it been? 1 hour?
2 hours.
Time felt distorted. Her stomach rumbled. She had not eaten anything since lunch. She was supposed to have dinner after her doctor's appointment. The same appointment Derek drove right past, which led her to this terrible place. She checked the center console and found a granola bar. It was crushed, but the wrapper was still intact. She ripped it open with her teeth and ate half, saving the other half for later. She had no idea how long she would be stuck here. Saving food seemed like a good idea. The granola bar tasted like dry cardboard, but it was food. It gave her some synergy for what was about to happen. Claire leaned her head back and closed her eyes for a second to rest, but another contraction hit her. Her eyes shot open. She gasped and counted 95 seconds. 90 seconds since the last one. This was really happening. The baby was come very soon. It could be hours or even less, and Claire had no idea what she was supposed to do. 3 hours in, her water broke. Claire felt the warm liquid gush out. There was no mistaking it. Her jeans were completely soaked, and the contractions instantly became much worse. She probably had 2 hours left, 3 if she was very lucky. Everyone said that first babies always take a long time to arrive. But it seemed Claire's body had a different plan. The pain was nonstop now. It was a deep ache that never went away. When a contraction hit, the ache felt like 1,000 tiny knives. It made her scream. It took 5 agonizing minutes for Claire to fight her way out of her soaking wet jeans, leaving her breathless. She wrapped Derek's jacket around her legs for warmth. The freezing air stung her skin, making her tremble uncontrollably. She pushed against the steering wheel, the door, anything solid to brace herself. She tried recalling her birthing classes, but the pain erased every lesson she had learned. "Come on," Claire whispered to herself. "You can do this. Women have done this for centuries. Your body will know what to do." But her body was sending a very different message. It screamed that this was all wrong. This should not be happening here. Like this, she needed a doctor, a hospital. She needed help from anyone. But nobody was coming. It was just her baby Ruby, and the raging storm outside. Claire's mind drifted to her mother. Her mom had given birth to her little brother Tommy at home. The hospital was just too far away, and the labor came on too fast. Her dad had delivered the baby, taking instructions over the phone from an emergency operator. Her mom had told that story so many times, making it sound like a thrilling adventure. But Claire finally understood the truth. Her mother must have been terrified, absolutely petrified. She was just very good at hiding her fear. Another contraction hit, and Claire screamed. The sound filled the small car, echoing off the glass like a cruel joke. It faded, and she saw the time on her phone, only 8% of battery left. It had been 2 hours since Derek drove away. Or maybe it was 3. Math was impossible right now, even thinking was hard. The pressure in her body was growing stronger, an instinct to push. The instructor had warned them about this. Do not push too soon. Wait for your body to be ready. Wait until you have no choice. Claire had no choice now. She tried to shift her body, half sitting, half lying down with her legs pushed against the dashboard. It was not comfortable at all, but nothing was comfortable, and this was better than the alternative.
"Okay, Ruby," she said softly. "Okay, my sweet baby girl. We are doing this together, just you and me. We can do this."
Another contraction seized her body. The need to push was overwhelming. Claire finally gave in and pushed with all her might. She felt something shift, something move inside her. She gasped for air and stopped, letting her body rest as the pain passed. This was progress. It was terrifying, but it was progress. The next contraction came even quicker. 90 seconds later, Claire was pushing again. She felt more movement, more intense pressure. So much pressure. She reached down with her hand. She felt wetness, and then something solid. Oh my goodness. It was the baby's head. It was Ruby's head. Claire's hand trembled. She snatched her hand back, grabbing the steering wheel for support. Okay, this is really happening. It is happening right now. Her mind raced to the umbilical cord. She would need to cut it. She needed something sharp. Claire frantically searched the glove compartment, pushing past phones and papers. She found Derek's small pocket knife, the one he always used for opening boxes. She placed it on the passenger seat where she could reach it later. After Ruby was born, if Ruby was born, when Ruby was born, another contraction arrived, this one lasting longer, 105 seconds. Claire pushed through the entire thing. She screamed through the entire thing. She could feel Ruby be moving, crowning. That was the word for it, crowning. They called it the ring of fire. Now Claire knew why. It felt like she was burning, like she was being torn apart. It felt like her body was splitting in two. Please, she cried out. Please, 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 please. She did not even know who she was begging for it to end, for someone to rescue her, for Derek to suddenly return and say it was all a bad dream. But Derek was not coming back, and this was not a dream. This was her new reality. The contraction finally ended. Claire was panting for breath. Her face was soaked in sweat even though it was freezing. Her hands would not stop shaking. Her entire body was shaking. She peered out the car window. It was still snowing heavily. It was still pitch black. There were no other cars, no help with cars. No one would rescue her. She was all alone. Another contraction, the most powerful one yet. Claire pushed with every bit of strength she had left. She felt Ruby's head emerge completely. The pressure eased for a second, then instantly returned. One more push, maybe two. That was all it would take. The next contraction began. Claire pushed and felt the baby's shoulders. Then she felt Ruby slip out into the world. A rush of fluid and blood and baby. Claire caught her in her trembling hands and pulled her to her chest. But Ruby was not crying. She was not moving. She was just lying there, silent and still. No, Claire whispered in disbelief. No, 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 no. She gently rubbed Ruby's back and patted her tiny chest. She cleared the baby's mouth with her finger. There was still nothing. Breathe, Claire begged her. Please breathe, please. She rubbed more firmly. She patted a little harder. Then she did the only thing she could think to do. She brought Ruby's face close to her own, breathing her warm air onto her, rubbing her back, and praying for her to live. And then Ruby gasped. A tiny, faint sound, followed by a small cry. Then a loud wail filled the car. It was the most beautiful sound Claire had ever heard in her life. Oh, thank goodness, Claire sobbed with relief. Thank goodness, thank goodness. She held Ruby tightly against her, using her own body to keep the baby warm. Ruby's cries were quiet, not very strong, but she was breathing. She was alive. They were both alive. Claire wrapped Ruby in Derek's jacket as best she could. She used her own shoelace to tie the umbilical cord, 6 inches from the baby, then another 6 inches from that tie. She cut the cord between the knots with Derek's knife. Her hand was shaking so badly that she almost dropped it. But she did it. The cord was cut. Ruby was her own person now. She was a whole person, not a part of Claire anymore. Ruby's cries started to get weaker. The cold was becoming too much for her. Her tiny lips were starting to turn a shade of blue. Claire pulled her daughter closer, unbuttoned her shirt, and tucked Ruby right against her skin. She zipped Derek's big jacket around both of them. Stay awake, Claire pleaded with Ruby. You need to stay awake. You have to keep crying. You have to keep fighting. But Ruby's crying softened to a whimper and then silence. The baby was still breathing. Claire could feel her small chest move up and down, but it was so faint, so very faint. Claire could feel her own life slipping away. The loss of blood, the tiredness, and the cold were all pulling her under. Her sight began to blur. Her head seemed impossible to lift. She considered sleeping, just for a minute of rest. Her eyelids closed, but then flew open again. No, to sleep was to die. Falling asleep in this cold meant she would never awaken. And if she did not wake up, Ruby would not make it. Claire pinched her arm, hard enough to leave a mark. The sharp pain cleared her mind. She did it over and over. She would do anything to stay awake. We are survivors, Claire whispered to Ruby. Do you hear me? We are going to survive this. We will prove him wrong. We will show him that we do not need him. We never ever needed him. Ruby did not move. Her small body was so still against Claire's chest. Too still. Panic began to rise in Claire needed help. They both needed help, but help was not on its way. The storm had gotten worse. The snow was much deeper now. Nobody would be driving on this road tonight. Suddenly, Claire's phone buzzed. She grabbed it from the passenger seat. 4% battery, 1 bar of signal. It was flickering, but it was there. Her fingers shook as she dialed 911. The call connected for a second, then it dropped. She tried one more time. It rang once, then twice, and then the call dropped again. 3% battery. The single bar of signal was gone. Claire felt a wave of despair. She wanted to scream, to smash the phone, to just give up. But giving up meant dying. And now she had Ruby. Ruby needed her mother. Ruby was counting on her. So Claire held her daughter as close as she could, using her body as a shield from the cold. She breathed her warm air on Ruby's face and whispered promises into the night. I have you. I will not leave you. We are going to survive this. Someone will find us. Someone has to find us. The snow continued to fall. The wind continued to howl. Ruby's breathing became even more shallow. Claire's arms grew weaker, and the night seemed to last for an eternity. Claire was drifting in and out of consciousness, not quite sleeping. She was somewhere between being awake and unconscious. Her mind began to wander. She saw images flash before her eyes. She saw her mother's kind face. She heard Beth's happy laugh. She saw Derek's cold, empty eyes. And she heard Ruby's first cry. She was so tired. It was a deep exhaustion in her bones, in her soul, the kind of tired you feel when you have used every last bit of your strength and there is nothing left. Ruby was silent on her chest, but she was still breathing. Her breaths were shallow, far too shallow. Claire noticed her own breathing had slowed down to match her daughter's. Their breaths were in sync, as if they had become one person again. Maybe this is how our story ends, she thought. The two of them together, slowly freezing to death in a car left on the side of the road. It would be a tragedy, a sad story for the news. A woman and her newborn baby found in a snowstorm. Derek would pretend to be heartbroken. He would play the part of the grieving husband. He would tell everyone that he had gone to find help. He would lie and lie and lie. Claire's eyes slowly closed just for a moment, just for a little rest, and then she saw a light, a bright white light that cut through the darkness. It swept across the car. It was moving and it was getting closer. Claire's eyes flew open. She lifted her head. Everything in her body ached. Her neck, her shoulders, her entire body screamed in pain. But she forced herself to move and to look outside. Headlights. They were real headlights. A vehicle was coming down, though, where it was moving slowly but surely, making its way through the deep snow. Help! Claire tried to yell, but only a faint whisper came out. Help us! She reached for the car horn and pushed it with all her might. There was no sound. The car's battery was dead. The horn was dead. Everything was dead. But the headlights kept moving toward her. Claire watched as they got nearer and nearer. They have to see my car, she thought. They have to see me parked on the shoulder. They have to stop. The vehicle drove right past her. No, no, no. No, Claire pounded on the window with what little strength she had left. She screamed, but no sound came from her throat. Then she saw the vehicle's brake lights flash red. It stopped about 50 yards down the road. Then she saw its reverse lights turn on. The vehicle started backing up, slowly and carefully, until it was right next to Claire's car. It was a truck, a huge semi-truck, the kind that drives freight across the country. The engine rumbled, a sound that was loud and alive and real. The driver's side door swung open. A man climbed down. He was tall and strong, and he was wearing a heavy coat and work boots. He walked Claire's car. The beam from his flashlight swept across her face. She saw only his shadow against the bright headlights of his truck. He pulled on her door. It was locked. Claire leaned over, her frozen fingers fumbling with the latch. They refused to cooperate. At last, she heard a click. The door swung open. A blast of cold air and snow rushed inside. "Good heavens," the man exclaimed. "Is that a baby?" "Help us," Claire whispered, "please." He acted instantly. He reached inside and gently lifted Ruby from Claire's grasp, cradling the baby inside his heavy coat. Then he helped Claire from the car. Her legs gave out the moment she tried to stand. He caught her, half carrying her to his pickup. The cab of his truck was warm. It was unbelievably warm. Claire felt the heat on her skin and thought she might weep. He settled her in the passenger seat, made sure the door was shut, and then got in on the driver's side, still holding Ruby. "Hospital," he said. "Where's the closest one?" 40 minutes that way, Claire said, pointing with a trembling hand. He shifted the truck into gear, pulled onto the road, and began to drive. His speed was fast but very steady. The wipers worked hard against the falling snow. The heater blew wonderfully hot air. My name is Jackson, he told her. Jackson Hayes, Claire, and this is Ruby, my daughter. She was I know, he said gently. I can see. You are safe now. Both of you are safe. He kept one hand firmly on the steering wheel. With the other, he checked on Ruby inside his coat, making sure she was warm and still breathing. Claire just watched this man, a total stranger who had come from nowhere. He had flecks of gray beard and kind lines around his eyes. His hands were steady, his voice calm. How long were you two out there? Jackson asked. 3 hours, maybe 4. I lost track of time. And your husband? He left. Jack's jaw grew tight, but he said nothing more. He just drove a little faster. Claire could feel her consciousness fading. The warmth of the truck, the steady motion, the wave of relief, it all made her want to give up and just sleep. You need to stay awake, Jackson said, noticing her eyelids flutter. I need you to keep awake. Talk to me. Tell me something about Ruby. She was just born. In the car. About 2 hours ago. You delivered her all by yourself? I had no other choice. That is incredible. You are an incredible woman. Claire let out a bitter little laugh. I am not incredible. I am an idiot. I should have known he would do this. I should have left him a long time ago. You are not an idiot. Men like him, they are experts at hiding who they really are. Experts at lying. Jackson spoke with certainty. As if from experience. It was as if he had witnessed this before. Claire wanted to ask him about it, but she was just too exhausted and overwhelmed. Ruby made a tiny noise, a little whimper from inside his coat. Jackson shifted slightly to make sure the baby was still snug. She is getting warmer, he said. That is a very good sign. The truck sped down the highway. The snow finally began to ease up. It was not much, but he could see the road better. Jackson drove with a quiet confidence, as if he knew this road by heart. Do you live nearby? Claire asked him. I live all over. I am a truck driver. Been doing this for about 3 years. Do you enjoy it? It is quiet. It gives me a lot of time to think. There was something in his tone, something sad. Claire wanted to ask, but felt she had no right. This man was saving her life, and that was more than enough. Soon, the hospital lights appeared. It was a low building of concrete, with a bright sign for the emergency room. Jackson drove right to the entrance, put the truck in park, and turned on his flashing lights. He got out and came around to Claire's side. He opened her door and helped her to the ground. She was holding Ruby again. Jackson had carefully passed the baby back to her, making sure she did not get cold. A nurse came running out with a wheelchair. A second nurse followed with a warm blanket. They took Ruby, then helped Claire into the chair and wheeled them both inside. It was bright and warm and safe in there. Claire glanced back. Jackson was standing by his truck, just watching to be sure she was okay. She gave him a small wave with her hand. Thank you, she mouthed. Thank you for my life. For my daughter's life. He gave a single, sharp nod, then got back into his truck. But he did not leave right away. He waited, with the engine still on, just to be certain. Claire then realized she never got his number, or even his last name. She had no way to ever thank him the right way. But perhaps that was fine. Maybe he was some kind of angel, a protector who shows up when you need him and leaves when his work is finished. The automatic doors slid shut. The hospital took Claire and Ruby in, and Jackson Hayes sat alone in his truck as the snow fell, waiting just a little while longer. The hospital room felt too bright, too sterile, and too hot. After so many hours in the freezing cold, Claire was now lying in a bed, hooked up to beeping monitors. An IV line in her arm steadily dripped fluids and medicine into her. They were fighting the cold, fighting any possible infection. Ruby was in a special warming bed next to her, swaddled in blankets, wearing a tiny knit hat. Her breathing was stronger, and her skin had more color, but she still looked so small and so fragile. Dr. Winter stood at the end of the bed. She was in her mid-50s with gray hair tied back and kind, knowing eyes. You are very lucky, she said. Both of you. To deliver a baby in those conditions, most people would not have made it.
I did not have
Joyce, Claire replied. What you did was cutting the cord, keeping her warm. Those actions absolutely saved her life. Claire gazed at Ruby, her tiny daughter who was alive only because Claire would not let her die. When can we leave? In a few days? We need to watch you both very closely. After that, you are going to need help. Do you have any family or friends? Claire thought of her friend Beth, but Beth's apartment was tiny. She hardly had enough space for herself. A new mother and a baby would be impossible. I will find a way, Claire said. Dr. Winters glanced at her chart and then put it down. The police were here, she said. They have your statement about your husband abandoning you. Did they find him? They located his car at the airport. He took a flight to Las Vegas this morning. Of course he did. Derek always ran. A coward to the very end. They will issue a warrant for his arrest, Dr. Winters said. The charges are going to be very serious. Good, Claire said. Let them be serious. Let Derek's innocent and sad tale for years. Let him feel a tiny piece of what I felt. But jail time would not return the 6 years she had lost with him. It would not heal the damage. It would not change what he did. There was a knock on the door. Beth rushed in, her red hair a mess, and her eyes puffy from crying. She went straight to the bed and gave Claire a hug that was both painful and deeply needed. Oh goodness, Beth cried out. I drove here the second I got the call. Are you all right? Is the baby all right? We are okay. Derek is. He is. I cannot even say the words. Beth pulled away and looked at the baby, and her face softened. Oh, she is so beautiful. Her name is Ruby.
Ruby, that is absolutely perfect.
Beth sat down and took Claire's hand, squeezing it for support. I should have said more, Beth said. I should have pushed you. I knew he was not right. I knew he was a total jerk, but I suppose I thought you would realize it on your own.
Oh, I did, Claire admitted. I just did not want to admit it was true. What will you do now? I have no idea. The apartment, the car, everything is in his name.
It all belongs to him. You will come stay with me for as long as you need to. Beth, you do not have the room. I will create the room. You will not face this but self. Claire felt the hot, grateful tears begin to form. Beth was her only support. There was another knock. A man stood in the doorway. He was in his 40s, with a gray beard and a heavy work coat. It was Jackson. I am sorry, he said. I did not mean to interrupt. I wanted to be sure you were both okay. Jackson, Claire said, surprised. You are still here. I stayed in the waiting area. I wanted to know how everything turned out. He walked into the room and looked at Ruby with a gentle smile. She is beautiful, he said. She is only here because of you. You would have found a way. You are strong. I am not that strong. You delivered your baby alone during a blizzard. That is the very meaning of strong. Beth looked back and forth between them, very curious. Claire quickly made introductions and explained what had happened. Beth's face shifted from confusion to pure amazement. You saved their lives, Beth said to Jackson. I was just passing by, but you stopped. A lot of people would have just kept going. Jackson just shrugged, clearly not comfortable with being called a hero. He seemed ready to leave, but also like he wanted to stay. Do you have any children? Claire asked. Jackson's entire expression changed. A deep sadness flickered in his eyes. No, he said softly, not anymore. The way he said, it told her everything. It was a loss, a recent loss, one that was still raw. I am so sorry, she said. It is fine. It was a very long time ago. But Claire knew it was not fine, and it did not seem like a long time ago at all. She could see the pain he was trying to conceal. Another knock came, this time from a young, nervous-looking police officer. He asked if Claire could answer a few more questions. She agreed. Jackson saw this as his chance to slip away. Wait, Claire called out. How can I ever thank you? How can I repay you for this? You do not have to. Just take good care of that little girl. That is all the thanks I need. He nodded at Beth and at the officer, and then he was gone. His footsteps faded away down the hall. Claire wished she had called him back, asked for his number, found some way to stay in touch, but she was too slow and exhausted. The police officer took a seat, opened his notebook, and began asking about Derek, the car, and all the details. Claire answered like a robot. Yes, he had planned it. No, she did not know where he went. Yes, she would press charges. The officer wrote it all down. He cleared his throat and told her they would be in contact. He promised that Derek would be held responsible. He promised there would be justice. But the word justice felt hollow and pointless. What good was Derek in jail if she and Ruby had no home and no money? After the officers left, Beth stayed right there. She moved her chair closer and held Claire's hand as she began to cry, not with sadness, but with pure, burning anger. It was a cry born from months of choked-back anger that finally burst out. Claire sobbed and said, I knew it. I knew something felt wrong. So why did I stay? Leaving is not simple, especially when you are pregnant, and especially when you are in love. But I do not love him now. Good, he is not worthy of your love. Just then, Ruby started to fuss. She made tiny noises that would soon become a full cry. Claire reached over, lifted her from the bassinet and held her close. Ruby instantly grew calm, happy to be near her mother. "You are a natural at this," Beth commented. "I am so scared," Claire admitted. "That is just part of being a parent, a mix of fear and love, and just hoping you get it right." They sat quietly for a moment. Beth looked at her phone while Claire held Ruby, listening to the steady beeps of the machines. Suddenly, Beth gasped. She shot upright in her chair. "What is it?" Claire asked, alarmed. "It is Derek, and oh, this is really bad." "What happened?" Beth turned her screen to show Claire several credit card statements. They were all in Claire's name, and every single one was maxed out. $50,000 of debt across 6 different cards. "How did you even find these?" Claire asked, her voice trembling. "I have a contact who works in the billing department. She ran a credit check on you when you were checked in. All of this is new from the last 3 months. $50,000. A wave of nausea hit Claire. She knew Derek had money issues, but this was a disaster. "It has to be gambling debt," Beth said. "Look at where the money was spent. Every charge is from casinos in Las Vegas, so Derek did not just leave her. He had also completely ruined her finances. He left her with a crushing amount of debt she could never repay, debt that would haunt her for many years." "I am finished," Claire whispered in despair. "No, you are not. We are going to fight this. We will show it was all fraud. You need to hire a lawyer and get the things fixed." "With what money?" Beth had no reply for that. The door suddenly flew open. Vivian Bennett marched into the room. She was a whirlwind of expensive pearls and pure rage. Her eyes landed on Claire, then on the baby, her face twisted with disgust. "How could you?" Vivian demanded. "Get out of my room," Claire said back. "You manipulated my son. You destroyed his future. And now you are trying to ruin him with your lies." "Lies? Your son left me in a blizzard while I was having this baby. That is not the truth. Derek explained everything to me. He left to find help. You were being irrational. You were completely hysterical. He was worried about his own safety." Beth got to her feet, placing herself between Vivian and Claire's bed. "Ma'am, you have to go, right now. I am speaking with my daughter-in-law. I am not your daughter-in-law any longer. I am getting a divorce, and I am pressing charges." Vivian's face flushed with anger. She jabbed a finger at Claire, her hand shaking. "You are a nobody. You have always been a nobody. Just some little gold digger who thought you could trap a Bennett boy. Well, your plan failed. Derek is free, and you are burdened with that mistake." She pointed toward Ruby, calling the baby a mistake. She called that sweet, innocent child a mistake. Something inside of Claire just snapped. Every bit of her fear, pain, and fury focused into a single, sharp point. "Leave," Claire said. Her voice was cold as ice. "Get out of here before I call security, and do not ever show your face again. You are not a part of our lives. Not today. Not ever." Vivian opened her mouth to argue, but then closed it, seeing she had lost. She spun around and walked away, the sound of her heels clicking down the hallway until they faded into silence. Beth slumped back into her chair with a long sigh. "That woman is absolute poison," Beth said. "I should have stopped dealing with her years ago. Hindsight is always perfect." They shared a tired smile, the kind people share after getting through something awful together. Ruby began to fuss once more. With trembling hands, Claire picked her up and checked her diaper, then changed it. Beth helped her out. Working together, they managed just fine. "We are going to be fine," Beth said softly. "I am not sure how right now, but we will be." Claire truly wanted to believe her. She wanted to feel that everything would be okay, but all she could imagine was the huge challenge in front of her. The debt, the divorce, being a single mother, all of it. Through the window, the sun was beginning to rise. It painted the white snow in shades of pink and gold. It was a new day, a fresh start. Ready or not, the hospital sent them home on the 3rd day. Ruby was healthy, and Claire was stable. The insurance company refused to pay for any more time, so they walked out into the chilly morning air. Beth took them to her apartment, a small 1-bedroom with a tiny kitchen and a couch that turned into a bed. She had moved things around and made as much space as she could. "It is not very big," Beth apologized. "It is absolutely perfect," Claire told her. But it was not perfect. It was crowded and uncomfortable, and clearly not a long-term solution. Beth was working 12-hour shifts at the hospital. This left Claire alone with Ruby for most of the day, a new mother in a strange place, trying her best not to be a problem, trying not to get in the way. At night, Ruby would cry from colic, impossible to soothe. Claire would pace with her for hours, bouncing and shushing her, whispering apologies to Beth through the thin wall. "I am so sorry," Claire would say. "Do not be sorry," Beth's voice would come back. "That is what babies do. It is all right." But it was not all right. Nothing about the situation was okay. In the daytime, when Ruby slept, Claire would call lawyers about the divorce, the debt, and what to do about Derek. Every lawyer told her the same thing. The process would take months, possibly even years. Proving the debt was fraud would be extremely difficult. The divorce was going to be complicated. Derek could simply say he never abandoned her. It would be her story against his. "But I had my baby in a car," Claire argued. "That is my proof." "That proves you gave birth," the lawyer replied. "But it does not prove he abandoned you. He could say he went for help and got turned around. He could claim the storm was much worse than he thought. But that, it probably is. But it is the story he can use, and with no one else to back you up, with no other proof, it gets messy." Messy? Her entire life felt messy. Claire ended the call and looked at her phone, at all the calls she had made that led nowhere. She had $312 in her bank account. The credit cards were completely full. The apartment she shared with Derek was no longer hers. He had already put it up for rent. Changed the locks, and kept everything that was inside. Claire only had the clothes Beth bought her, along with the diapers and formula from the hospital. And she had Ruby. She still had Ruby. That was enough. It had to be. 1 week went by. Then another 2 weeks passed. Claire started applying for food stamps, for any kind of government aid she could find. The amount of paperwork was overwhelming. The questions they asked were deeply personal. The caseworkers often looked at her with judgment. "Where's the baby's father?" they would ask. "He is gone." "Are you getting child support?" "I am working on it." "What about family?" "My mother passed away. My father left when I was 3. "What about friends?" Cliff would think about her friend Beth, kind, generous Beth, overworked Beth. Beth, who was giving her everything and getting absolutely nothing back. "I am staying with a friend," Claire would finally say. "How long will you be able to stay there?" "I do not know." And that was the honest truth. She really did not know. Beth never once complained or asked Claire when she was leaving. But Claire could see the pressure building. She saw how Beth's smiles became a little more forced, how she picked up extra shifts at work, how sometimes she would look at Claire like she was a puzzle that needed to be solved. Then one afternoon, about 3 weeks after leaving the hospital, there was a knock on Beth's door. Claire opened it. She had Ruby on her hip, a spot of formula on her shirt, and her hair had not been washed in 2 days. Jackson was standing there in the hallway. He wore the same work coat and had the same gray beard. In his hands, he held a bag of groceries. "Jackson," Claire said, surprised. "How did you know where I was?" "I asked around at the hospital. I thought you might need a little help. You cannot just go around tracking people down. That is basically stalking." "You are right. I am sorry. I was not thinking. I was worried and wanted to see if you were doing okay." He looked very uncomfortable. He seemed to wish he had not come at all, and he started to leave. Claire instantly felt a pang of guilt. "Wait," she called out. "I am sorry. It is just that everything has been so difficult lately. Please come inside." Jackson paused, then came in and placed the grocery bag on the kitchen counter. Claire took a look inside the bag. She saw diapers, baby formula, and food. It was exactly what they needed most. "You should not have done this," Claire told him. "I know," he said, "but I wanted to help." Ruby started to get fussy. Claire bounced her gently, trying to soothe her, but Ruby continued to cry. It was that sharp, high-pitched cry of a newborn that frays your nerves and breaks your heart. "Can I try?" Jackson asked. He held his arms out. Claire was hesitant for a moment, but then she carefully passed Ruby to him. Jackson held a gentle touch, cradling her close to his chest as he began to rock back and forth. It was a natural, calming rhythm. Ruby settled down almost right away. "You are very good with her," Claire observed. "I used to be," he said. There was that hint of sadness in his voice again, that sense of loss. Claire was curious, but felt it was not her place to ask. It was none of her business. They stood there in a slightly awkward silence, with Jackson swing Ruby and Claire just watching them. The small apartment felt even smaller with him there. But somehow it also felt a little bit safer. I have an offer for you, Jackson said, breaking the silence. Okay, I own a piece of land just outside of town, about 20 acres. There is a main house and a smaller guest house. The guest house is empty. It has been for 2 years now. Jackson, please just hear me out. You and Ruby could live there. I would not charge you any rent, just until you are able to get back on your feet. I cannot accept that from you, and why not? Because you are a stranger to me, because it is too generous, and because I am not a charity case. This is not charity. This is just helping someone out. There is a big difference. I do not think there is. Jackson looked at her directly. His eyes were full of kindness, but they were also determined. He had already made his decision. You have a brand new baby. You have no money. You are sleeping on your friend's sofa. Your pride is a luxury, he said, and it is a luxury you cannot afford right now. His words were sharp because they were true. Claire felt her jaw clench. And what would you get from all of this? She asked. Nothing. I would get nothing at all, except for the good feeling of helping someone who is in need. People do not just help for no reason. There is always some kind of catch. I promise you, there is no catch. Claire wanted so badly to believe him, to trust him. But her experience with Derek had shattered her ability to trust. It had taught her that people can lie, that help always has strings attached. Ruby began to fuss in her arms again. Jackson handed the baby back to her. Claire held her daughter. She felt the heavy weight of her child, of her responsibility, of the huge job of keeping her safe and sound. Let me think about it, Claire said. Of course. Here. He took a card out of his pocket. It was just a phone number that was written in pen on the back of an old receipt. Call me once you have decided. Then he was gone. The apartment suddenly felt very empty after he left. Too empty. Claire looked at the food he had brought them and at the card with his number on it. She looked down at Ruby, who needed so much and who deserved the entire world. Pride was an expensive thing. Jackson was definitely right about that. When Beth came home, she saw the groceries and asked about them. After Claire told her the story, Beth sank heavily into a chair. You have to accept his offer, she said. Does it not seem odd? A stranger offering you a free home? Maybe, but what other choice is there? You cannot stay here forever. I love you, but this apartment is just not big enough for 3 people. I know. So go see the place. If it feels wrong, you can just leave. Her friend was right. Beth was always right. That night, after everyone was asleep, she called Jackson. He answered on the very first ring. I will come see the place, Claire said. No promises. I am just looking. That is all I am asking. They set up a time. The next day, Beth would drive Claire and Ruby there, just to be on the safe side. Claire could not sleep that night. Lying on the couch, she thought about risk and trust. Jackson had already saved her life once. Perhaps he was truly a good person. Maybe accepting help was not a weakness. Or perhaps she was being incredibly naive. This could all end very badly. She might regret this choice. But regret was better than freezing to death. It was better than watching Ruby suffer just because of her mother's pride. Ruby stirred in her bassinet, making soft baby sounds. She was perfect. Okay. Claire whispered to her. We will try. We will take this chance for you. Ruby deserved more than a fold-out couch. She deserved a mother who was not too proud to accept help. Claire closed her eyes and tried to rest. She dreamed of snow and storms, and of headlights piercing the darkness. She dreamed of Jackson's steady hands holding Ruby, taking care of them. Maybe it would work out, maybe it would not. But it was a step forward. It was hope. The guest house was beautiful. Claire had not expected that at all. She had imagined a rundown shack. But this place was gorgeous. It had pale blue siding and a porch with rocking chairs. It was clean, perfect, and completely empty. This is too much, Claire told him. Jackson stood in the doorway. It is just sitting here, he said. It might as well be used. But why are you helping me? He was silent for a moment, looking toward the main house. It was a larger, identical version of the cottage. My wife died 3 years ago, he said at last. There were complications with the birth. The baby died, too. I lost them both in one day. Claire felt a tightness in her chest. Jackson, I am so very sorry. When I found you and Ruby that night, he explained, it felt like a second chance to do something right. You could not have saved them. It was not your fault. My head knows that, he said, but my heart does not. He turned to her, his eyes glistening with tears he would not let fall. So that is why, he said. That is the catch. I am trying to make peace with my loss, and helping you helps me do that. It suddenly made sense. His kindness was not a trap. He was trying to heal himself. Okay, Claire said. We will stay for a while, until I can figure things out. Stay as long as you need. Beth helped her move her few belongings. Her clothes, some diapers, and the bassinet all fit in the back of the car. That night in the guest house, Claire put Ruby to bed. Then she walked through the rooms, touching the walls to make sure it was all real. She went to the kitchen and found it was fully stocked. It was as if Jackson knew she was nothing. She made tea and stood by the window, looking at the main house. A light was on. She saw his shadow moving behind the curtains. Claire was curious about his story, but she also knew not to ask. Some pain is too private to talk about. When Ruby cried, Claire calmly went to her. The routine of being a mother was becoming more natural. We are okay, Claire whispered to her baby. We are safe here. The days turned into weeks. Claire's life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Jackson gave her space. He would leave groceries on the porch and wave if he saw her, but he never bothered her. Claire would often see him working outside. He was always busy, always moving. It seemed like if he ever stopped, his grief would overwhelm him. One afternoon, an expensive car pulled up to the main house. A younger man who looked like Jackson got out. Claire watched from her window as they talked. The visitor pointed toward her guest house and laughed. Then they both went inside. Claire felt uneasy. Who was that man? What were they discussing? An hour later, Jack Senton knocked on her door, and she answered with Ruby in her arms. That was my brother, Marcus, Jackson said. I wanted to explain before you got the wrong idea. Okay, she replied. He thinks it is strange for me to let you stay here, Jackson explained. And what did you tell him? I told him it is none of his business. Claire could not help but smile. Thank you. He is just worried that I might be taken advantage of. I am not trying to do that. I know, he said. I told him so. Jackson looked like he wanted to say something else. He smiled down at Ruby. She is getting bigger, he said. 6 weeks old tomorrow. How are you doing? I mean, really? Claire wanted to say she was fine, but his kindness made her be honest. I am scared, she admitted. The divorce is taking a very long time. Derek's lawyer is much better than mine, and I will be in debt for years. Is he providing child support? Derek is claiming he is too traumatized to work because of the charges I filed. That is ridiculous, Jackson said. Welcome to the justice system, she replied. He frowned, looking like he wished he could fix everything for her. Let me know if you need anything, he said. Money for the lawyer, whatever you need. Jackson, you have already done so much for me. It is not enough, he insisted. Not after what you have been through. He left before she could protest. She watched him walk away, this stranger who had saved her and given her so much. She needed to understand him better. That evening, Claire did what anyone would do. She searched for him online. Jackson Hayes Trucker. The results were empty. He had no social media presence at all, as if he did not exist. A search for Jackson Hayes, Colorado only showed public records. There was nothing personal about him anywhere. She searched for his business, his company, even his wife's name. Nothing. It was very strange. Most people leave some kind of a digital trail, but Jackson was a complete ghost. She gave up and closed her laptop. He was probably just a very private person. Maybe he deleted everything after his wife passed away. The internet might have been too painful for him. That night, Derek called for the first time since he had left her. The phone rang at midnight and she answered it half asleep. What do you want? She asked. I need you to drop the charges, he said. She had forgotten how much she hated his voice. No, she replied. Claire, this is ruining my life. I cannot work. I might go to prison. Good, she said coldly. It was just one mistake. Do not punish me forever. One mistake? Derek, you left me when I was in labor. You destroyed my credit and you stole from me. I did not steal. We are married. What is yours is mine, he continued. Not anymore, she said. I have filed for divorce. You will never survive on your own. You need me. Claire let out a harsh laugh that surprised her. If I survived giving birth alone in a blizzard, I think I can handle life without you. This is because of him, is it not? That trucker. You are sleeping with him. Excuse me? I know you are living on his property. I know he is helping you. You could not even wait for the divorce. I am not sleeping with him, she said. And even if it were, it is none of your business. It is my business. You are still my wife, only on paper and not for much longer. There was silence. Then Derek's voice turned low and mean. You think you are so strong now, but you are nothing, he hissed, and that baby will grow up knowing that her mother destroyed her father. Claire's hands were shaking with rage. She wanted to scream. She wanted to hurt him. Instead, she took a deep breath and found her calm. Ruby will grow up knowing her father was a coward. That is on you, not me. She hung up the phone and blocked his number. She sat shaking in the dark. Then she heard a knock on the door. Claire jumped. It was 12:30 in the morning. She looked through the peephole and saw Jackson. I heard yelling, he said. Are you okay? It was Derek, she answered. He wanted me to drop the charges, to say I was nothing. Jackson's face grew hard. He is not allowed to contact you. Is there not a restraining order? It is temporary. He called from a blocked number. I did not realize it was him. This is harassment. It is Derek. Jackson came inside without asking. He went to the windows and made sure they were locked. He checked the back door. He made sure it was secure. You need better protection, he said. I will install cameras in the morning. And motion sensors. You will see anyone who gets close. Jackson, you do not have to. Yes, I do. You are safe here. I promised you that. I am keeping that promise. I felt the power in his voice, his need to protect. Claire had a strange feeling. It was not attraction. It was more like she could see him clearly now. Thank you, she managed to say. Do not thank me. Just be safe. Then he left. Claire locked the door and checked it 2 times. She went to Ruby's room to watch her daughter sleep so safe from Derek's rage. Knowing only warmth and love. He cannot harm us, Claire whispered. Jackson will not let him. I will not let him. But Derek's words echoed in her mind. You are nothing. That baby is a mistake. You cannot make it alone. But she was not alone. She had Beth. She had Jackson. She had Ruby. Just maybe it's all she needed. The cameras were installed the next day. But Jackson put them in himself. 2 cameras faced the guest house entrance. One watched the back door. Another watched the driveway. He taught Claire how to view them on her phone. He showed her how to receive alerts and how to record. If Derek comes back, you will see him, Jackson said. Thank you. Please stop thanking me. But Claire could not stop. Every act of kindness felt huge. Each gesture was a gift. She was not used to people helping without expecting a reward. A month went by, then 6. Ruby grew. She began to smile and make little sounds. She started to know Claire's face and the sound of Jackson's voice. Jackson started visiting more often. He would hold Ruby so Claire could take a shower. He fixed things around her guest house. A faucet that dripped, a door that squeaked. Things Claire never even mentioned. One afternoon, Marcus returned. He arrived in his fan car and got out holding a briefcase. He knocked on Jackson's door. Jackson let him enter. They were in there for 2 hours. Claire watched from her window, feeling worried and curious. What kind of work did Jackson do that needed a briefcase and long private meetings? Then Marcus left. Jackson came straight to the guests. He seemed exhausted and worn out, as if the meeting took something from him. Is everything all right? Claire asked. Just family business. It is not important. Are you sure? He nodded, but he would not look at her. That night, Claire could not fall asleep. Something felt wrong. Something about the meeting between Jackson and Marcus. Something about that expensive car and the briefcase and the secrets. She stood up and went to her window. She looked toward the main house. A light was on in a room that seemed to be an office. She saw Jackson at his desk, with papers everywhere, his head in his hands. Whatever his problem was, it was a heavy one. Claire made up her mind. She wrapped Ruby in a blanket, crossed the yard to the main house, and knocked it gently. Jackson answered the door with a surprised look on his face. Claire, it is 11 o'clock at night. I know. Can I come in? He moved out of the way. Claire entered the house she had never seen, and then she stopped. The inside was very expensive. It was extremely expensive. It had hardwood floors, special furniture, and art on the walls. This was not the house of a truck driver. This was the house of a very rich man. Jackson, she said very slowly. What is it that you do? He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. I drive trucks. No? What did you do before this? Does that matter? It might. He pointed toward the living room. They took a seat. Ruby slept in Claire's arms. Jackson leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. I sold a company, he said, 5 years ago. It was a tech company that made software for managing supply chains. I sold it for a lot of money. How much is a lot? $900 million. Claire stared at him. She blinked as she processed the number. 900 million. That was the kind of money a billionaire has. You are a billionaire, she said. Technically, yes. After taxes and investments are considered, and you choose to drive trucks. After my wife passed away, I could no longer deal with the business world. I sold it all. I gave most of the money to charity. I kept enough to live. I started driving trucks to, I do not know, feel something again. Claire looked at the house again. She saw the expensive furniture and the art and everything else. It all started to make sense. The guest house was too nice. The groceries just appeared. The security cameras. He never worried about money. Why did you not tell me? She asked. Would you have let me help if you had known? No, that is why. She had a point. Claire would not have. She would have thought he wanted something in return. She would have run away from him.
Marcus believes that you are taking advantage of me.
Jackson went on. He thinks you are just using me for my money. I am not. I know that, but he does not. He wants me to have you sign documents, legal papers, to prove you will not sue me for anything. I will sign anything he wants. You do not have to do that. I do, because I am not using you, and I want to prove it. Jackson really looked at her then. He truly saw her. His expression changed from defensive to open. His caution turned into trust. I believe you, he said. The moment felt long. Claire realized she was in his house at night, in her pajamas, holding her baby. It felt very close, too close. I should probably go. Claire, please wait. She paused and turned around. I have something else to tell you, Jackson said. My wife's name was Emma. She wanted children for many years. We tried. We were not able to conceive a baby naturally. We did in vitro fertilization and got pregnant. Everything seemed perfect until it was not. You do not need to tell me. I want to. Emma. He cleared his throat. She went into labor too soon. At 32 weeks, there were complications. A placental abruption. She bled out before they could do an emergency surgery. The baby, our son, he'd not survive either. Claire's throat felt tight. Jackson, when I found you and Ruby that night, it was like the world was giving me a second chance. A chance to save someone and do something good. Because I was not able to save Emma. I was not able to save our son. He was crying now. Not loud sobs, just silent tears fell down his face. 3 years of pain were finally coming out. Claire sat down again. She put Ruby in her bassinet. Then she did something she had never done. She hugged Jackson. She just held her arms around him and held him close. He hugged her back so tightly, like she was the only thing holding him together. They stood like that for a very long time. Two broken people who were supporting each other. There were no words, only a shared feeling, a silent understanding. When they let go, Jackson wiped his tears and gave a nervous laugh. I am sorry. That was probably too much. It was not too much. It was honest. He saw her differently now. Not like she was a project, but more like a friend, or maybe more. Claire was not sure. She did not know if she wanted to be sure. A car came up the driveway. It was fast and loud. The lights from the motion sensor turned on. Claire looked out the window and her body went still. It was Derek's car. It was Derek's face. Derek was walking angrily toward the main house. He is here, Claire whispered. Jackson stood up. He moved between Claire and the door. Call the police. Claire found her phone and dialed 911. She told them what was happening. They told her officers were coming. Derek began to beat on the door. Claire, I know you are in there. We have to talk. Jackson opened the door and stepped out, closing it behind him. Claire watched him through the window. You need to leave, Jackson said. His voice was very calm. It was a deadly calm. Who in the world are you? Derek yelled. I am the person who is telling you to leave. I am here to see my wife. She is not your wife now. That is for you to decide. Derek tried to get past him. Jackson did not budge. He just stood there. He was like a solid wall. You are trespassing, Jackson said. The police have been called. You need to go before you get into more trouble. More trouble? This is all your fault. You took my wife from me. You made her turn against me. I found your wife nearly frozen because you left her. I did not take anything. You threw her away. Derek's face became a mask of rage. He lunged towards Jackson and threw a punch. Jackson grabbed his fist and twisted it. Derek cried out. He fell to his knees. I have studied martial arts for 20 years, Jackson said. You do not want to do this. He let Derek go. Derek scrambled away, holding his wrist. He looked between Jackson and the house, searching for Claire. You think you are so great, Derek said. You think you are her savior. But she is just using you. She will take all of your money. I do not have anything she wants, Jackson answered. Police sirens grew louder in the distance. Derek heard them as well. He started backing up to his car. This is not finished, he said. Yes, it is. The police cars arrived. 2 officers got out. They approached Derek, asked for his identification, and explained he was violating a court order. They put him in handcuffs. Derek argued and made threats. He asked for his lawyer. The officers were not impressed. They put him into the police car and drove off. And just like that, it was all over. Jackson came back into the house. Claire was shaking. She held Ruby close, trying to stay calm. He is gone, Jackson said. He will not come back. How can you be so sure? Because he now knows what you have. You have protection. You have support. You have me. He is a bully. Do not fight when they know they are beaten. Claire trusted him. For the first time in many months, she felt safe, completely safe. It was not just physical safety, it was emotional. Jackson had defended her and protected her, and he asked for nothing in return. You said you studied martial arts. Claire said, I did for 20 years. And you used to own a $900 million company, he corrected her, owned in the past, and now you drive trucks. I am man of many talents, he joked. Claire laughed. It was a real laugh, the kind she had not made in months. Jackson smiled back. It was a smile that changed his whole face. Thank you, Claire said. You are welcome. Ruby started to wake up and make noises. Claire lifted the baby and rocked her gently. Jackson was watching with a sorrowful, wanting expression. It was the look of a person who desired something unattainable. Would you like to hold her? Claire offered. After a moment, Jackson nodded. Claire placed Ruby into his arms. He held her with great care, as if she were fragile glass. Ruby instantly grew calm and quiet in his embrace. You are very good with her, Claire remarked. I have had some practice. Tell me about your son. Did he have a name? We plan to name him James. Or Jamie, that is a lovely name. Emma chose it. She felt it sounded both strong and gentle, which is what she wanted for him. They sat there for a long time, with Jackson holding Ruby and Claire watching them. The night seemed to go on forever. After a while, Ruby was asleep. Jackson hesitantly returned her to Claire. I should probably let you get some sleep, he said. Please stay a bit more, she replied. So he stayed. They sat in a peaceful quiet, not talking. They just needed the company, to not be alone. In the hours before sunrise, something changed. The pain and loss that had shaped them began to ease its grip. It was not gone and never would be. But the burden felt lighter, easier to carry, because they were sharing it. 3 months passed, the snow was gone, the mountains were green again, and the birds returned. The world felt new. Ruby was now 4 months old. She could roll over, and she laughed and reached for things. She was growing so quickly that Claire could hardly believe it. Her divorce was now final. Derek admitted he was guilty of abandoning them. He received 2 years of probation, had to do community service, and attend required counseling. A restraining order was put in place permanently. The debt on the credit cards was declared fraudulent. A judge made Derek pay it all back, every single cent plus extra for damages. Claire's credit score was fixed and her reputation was restored. Derek's mother, Vivian, mailed her a letter. It was a very formal and apology, but it seemed sincere. She wrote that she now understood what her son was truly like. She even confessed that she had made it possible for him to behave that way. She begged for forgiveness and asked if she could see Ruby one day. Claire was not sure what to do, perhaps one day, but maybe not. She had plenty of time to decide. Her friend Beth visited for dinner each week. She and Jackson were now friends, brought together by their desire to protect Claire and their shared dislike of Derek.
Claire began working for herself again. She did graphic design from her house, taking small projects that grew into larger ones. People heard about her work.
Her list of clients got bigger. She could afford her rent, help with food costs, and support herself. Jackson refused to accept rent or any money from her. He insisted the guest house was hers for as long as she required. I have to give you something, Claire insisted. Then you can pay me by allowing me to be in Ruby's life. And that was the arrangement they made. Jackson would visit every evening. He held Ruby as Claire prepared dinner. He would read stories to the baby, who did not yet understand, and make funny faces to see her laugh. He had a natural talent with the baby, as if being a father was part of who he was. One evening, late in the spring, Jackson asked Claire to come to his house for dinner. He told her he had something to show her. Claire wrapped Ruby up warmly and crossed the familiar yard. Jackson had prepared a real meal with pasta, salad, and fresh bread. He had set the table with candles and soft music was playing. "What is all this for?" Claire asked him. "No special reason. I just felt like it." They ate their meal and chatted. Ruby was in her high chair, biting on a toy. Their talk was relaxed and natural. They had found a comfortable routine, like partners. When dinner was over, Jackson placed some papers on the table. "What are these?" she asked. "These are for a foundation. I am creating a charity for mothers who are in trouble. It will provide emergency homes, legal help, and money. It is everything you needed but did not have." Tears welled in Claire's eyes. "Jackson, I want you to be in charge of it. You can be the director. You understand what these women require because you have been through it."
"But I am not qualified for that," she said. "You are more qualified than anyone I can think of."
He pushed the documents toward her. Claire began to read. She saw the mission, the plans, and the budget. Jackson was investing $20 million. $20 million. "This is, I cannot do this as you can, and you will. Women like you should have better. They should have help and someone on their side." Claire looked at him. The man who had rescued her, given her a home, kept her safe, and expected nothing while giving her so much. "Why are you doing all of this?" she asked. "Truly, because 3 years ago I was unable to save the woman I loved. But perhaps I can help save others. Perhaps Emma's death can have some meaning." "It was not meaningless," Claire said. "She made you into the man you are today." "She did," he agreed. "And I am doing my best to honor her memory." They gazed at one another from across the table as the candle flames danced. The music continued in the background. Ruby made cheerful baby noises. A feeling had been growing between them for months. It was silent and not spoken of, but it was getting stronger and harder to deny. "I am not ready for a new relationship," Claire said in a quiet voice. "I understand. Derek ruined my trust in people." "I know," he said, "but maybe in the future you'd be willing to wait for me." Jackson gave her a rare, wonderful smile.
"I have waited 3 years to feel like I am living again. I can wait for as long as it takes." He reached out, took her hand, and simply held it. There was no pressure and no demands, only a feeling of connection.
"Thank you," Claire said, "for all of it, for rescuing us." "You rescued yourself," he replied. "All I did was drive the truck. You did much more than that, and so did you." Ruby tossed her teething toy, and it landed on the floor with a bounce. Both Claire and Jackson started to laugh. The serious mood was broken. They began to clear the table, but Jackson told Erster to leave the dishes for him. Claire took Ruby back to her own little house, tucked her into bed, and then watched the main house from her window, seeing Jackson's shadow move inside. She thought back to Derek, to the coldness and the fear. She remembered the pain of having a baby all alone and the feeling that she might not live. But she did live. In fact, she did more than just live. She created a completely new life for herself. She made true friends, found a powers inside her she never knew existed. When Derek left her, it felt like her world was over, like a kind of death. But it was really a new beginning. The terrible situation had pushed her to save her own life. That disaster had brought her to people who truly cared for her. She had always been free. She just needed Ruby to help her see it. Claire's phone vibrated with a message from Beth. "How was dinner with that guy who is not your boyfriend?" Claire smiled and typed her reply. "It was good, really good. Are you starting to fall for him?" "I think so, a little at a time." "That is good. He is a good man." And he was. Jackson was the evidence she needed that good men were real, that not all people lie, and that you can find help with no catches. Then another message appeared, this one from Jackson. "Thank you for sharing dinner with me and for including me in your lives." Claire wrote back, "Thank you for providing us with a home." His reply came instantly. "It is your home for as long as you wish." She gazed around the little house. At the furniture she had chosen, the toys all over the floor, and the photos on the walls. There was one of Beth with Ruby in the hospital, another of Ruby's first smile, and a picture of Jackson making the baby laugh. This was truly her home. Not the apartment she had with Derek or the sofa at Beth's place. This small house with these people was home. The seasons turned from Tister into spring, from an ending to a new start, and Claire had been reborn with them. She heard sounds outside and looked to see Jackson walking around the edge of the property. It was his routine checking that everything was safe and that she was protected. He noticed her at the window and gave a wave if she waved in return. The next day, she would begin making plans for the foundation. She would work on the programs and the money and find ways to help other women. She would transform her pain into a reason to live, but for tonight she would simply feel thankful. Thankful to be alive, thankful for Ruby, and thankful for the kindness of a stranger who was now like family. The long winter was finally over. The warmth of spring had finally arrived, but Claire Bennett would never forget the cold. She stood before 20 women in a quiet conference room. Each one was a mother, each one was in trouble, and each one was searching for hope. My name is Claire Bennett, she said, her voice clear. I gave birth alone in my car during a blizzard. She then told them everything. She spoke of the betrayal, the freezing car, and the terror of being alone. Every woman there leaned in, hearing parts of her own story in Claire's words. You are not alone anymore, Claire told them. You are so much stronger than you think. This place exists because one person helped me when I had nothing. Now, we are here to help you. After she finished, the women came to her, sharing their own stories of survival. Every story was different, but they all shared the same pain. They were women who had been abandoned but had found a way to keep going. Claire listened to every single one, making notes and plans. These mothers would get safe homes, legal support, and help with their children. A little girl named Ruby then walked through the room. At 14 months old, she charmed everyone with her little two-word phrases. Jackson followed close behind her, making sure she stayed out of trouble. He looked every bit the proud father he had always wanted to be. In just its first year, the foundation helped 40 women. It gave shelter to 23 and provided lawyers for 18. It even reunited 3 mothers with families they thought they had lost forever. This was only the beginning. That evening, Jackson cooked dinner back at their house. He did that often now. He lived in the guest house on the property with Claire and Ruby. The main house stood empty, except for his office. They had officially become a couple 6 months before. They moved slowly and carefully, building trust one day at a time. It was a gentle love, growing stronger in its own time. Ruby called me Dada today, Jackson said softly as they ate. We were at the store, and someone asked if I was her father. She just said, Dada. Claire saw the joy in his eyes, mixed with a deep sadness. Ruby would never get to know Emma, but this new family was forming all the same. Are you okay with that? Claire asked gently. I can correct her if you want. It is not a problem for me. I feel honored. They planned a small wedding for the autumn. It would be just Beth and Marcus with their closest friends. Claire did not need to get married, but she wanted to. She wanted to choose Jackson and build a family together with purpose. Derek was out in California doing construction work to pay his debts. Vivian had cut him off completely, refusing to enable his choices. She saw Ruby twice a year during supervised visits. They were a bit awkward, but slowly getting better. Beth and Marcus had also started dating. They were taking things slow, learning from Claire and Jackson not to rush. Life felt good, even if it was not perfect. Ruby still had bad dreams sometimes. The foundation had its own set of challenges. Claire still woke from nightmares about the cold, the snow, and feeling all alone. But she was alive. Ruby was doing wonderfully. And Jackson was home. He was truly home. That evening, after Ruby fell asleep, Claire and Jackson sat together on the porch. The spring air was filled with the sound of crickets, and the sky was full of stars. Do you ever have second thoughts? Claire asked. About stopping for me that night? Never, he said. Not even when I am being difficult? Especially then. She rested her head on his shoulder, and he put his arm around her. She felt secure, loved, and finally understood what home was. The most difficult thing was not admitting that I knew Derek was wrong for me. Claire said, I was learning to forgive myself for staying for so long. You stayed because you are a loyal person. That is not a weakness. It almost destroyed me, but it did not. You made it through. You are here now. That is what counts. She realized the prison door was never locked. Derek did not trap her. She was her own guard, and Ruby was the one who set her free. Ruby was the emergency that pushed her to find the way out, to step through it, and to start a new life. Jackson was the one who told the doors can be opened by others, and that help is there if you are ready to take it. He reminded her that good people still exist. The snow was long gone, but Claire was only now understanding what it all meant. The winter was finally over. Spring was here, and she was finally warm enough to feel it. "I love you," she said softly. "I love you too." They were simple words, but they held so much meaning. This time, Claire had made the right choice. She had picked a partner, not a prison. She had chosen honesty over deception. Ruby made a happy noise from her bedroom, not crying, just cooing. Claire began to stand up. Jackson gently stopped her. "I'll just check on her," he said. He went into the house. Claire could hear him speaking gently to Ruby. She heard her daughter start to giggle. They were playing a little game. He was her father, not by blood but by choice and by love. That was something Derek could never grasp. It is not about blood. It is about choice. It is about being there for someone. It is about not leaving when life gets tough. It is about driving into a storm and stopping when no one else would. Claire over at the guest house and the warm lights inside. She thought about the life she had created from nothing, from being left behind, from just surviving. She finally knew the prison door had been open the entire time. She had been the one guarding her cell, but she was also the one who freed herself. The key was always with her. Ruby simply helped her find where she had put it. Claire's journey from a freezing car to starting a foundation that helps women shows us something vital. Our darkest times can be the start of something wonderful. If this story touched your heart, if you were inspired by Claire's, and if you think this message needs to be heard, please press the like button. Leave a comment and tell me which part of the story meant the most to you. Share this with someone who needs a reminder of their own strength. And for more stories about overcoming challenges, about new beginnings, and about people who never gave up, please subscribe. Stories important. Your story is important. And with each other, workspace means something more than just videos. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a part of this. And always remember, the door to your prison is unlocked. You just need to find your own key. I will see you in the next story.